the messages they just weren't any good. And I was slightly surprised because it wasn't a terribly complex task there. And when I asked what's happened, I gave some feedback and asked what's happened. The answer I was given was that that's what ChatGPT came up with. And I was slightly taken aback there because, that wasn't an acceptable response. And what bothers me wasn't that AI had been used, because like I was describing it, we are using AI for so many different things professionally. And that's a reality of how people work now. But what bothered me was that the use of the tool had been offered to me as an explanation, almost an excuse why the output wasn't right. So it was almost as if ChatGPT's authorship changed the question of whether the output was any good. And what I could see from my end was that the review of the output had been skipped. And the fact that the ChatGPT was mentioned as a reason made that very visible. So I think the problem there is that the AI tool had become a buffer between a practitioner and their professional judgment, which is exactly the scenario you were describing before, when organizations deploy agents and just let them roam free.
Yeah, it's very dangerous in many ways. No, especially from a security aspect. Hello, everybody. Thank you for hopping in here. We are live. And yeah, I probably should have asked you this in the preview room. I don't want to mispronounce your name. Andrea?
Perfect. Spot
Andrea.
on.
Okay, so hello, everyone. My name is Lior. I run a newsletter called Exploring ChatGPT. Going to be pretty brief with the introduction for myself. I'm really excited for this one. We're kind of dive into the professional world of AI here, which is a new topic for me. And I'm joined by Andrea. Andrea, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you. And nice of you to have me here, Leo. So as you know, my name's Andrea. I am a management consultant. I spend most of my time speaking with clients and helping them solve their challenges. And my sector is research and higher education. So I do most of my work with universities, research funders, and companies in this space. And in my free time, I also write a publication called The Art of Asking Questions here on Substack. And in my publication, in a nutshell, I help readers learn to think like a human consultants in the age of AI. And I tend to explore topics like culture, strategy, high-performing behaviors through various lenses, one of which is AI, which is what brings me here today.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm super excited for this one, man. There's a lot of, for me personally, aside from Substack, I'm on YouTube as well. And sometimes I'll be watching YouTube videos and you got so many YouTube videos about how to make a quick buck with AI, right? And probably not enough people actually talking about how to actually be a professional and take accountability and hopefully, you mentioned in the preview room, not embarrass yourself by using it, which means you need to take the right steps in using it. So before we jump into the topics that we have here, I'd like to know from you, Andrea, if you could give us a little more background on your own professional use. You mentioned that you're in consulting, right? So what does the AI world look like in consulting for you?
Right. There's lots of different roles. So first of all, we are a Claude company. So we subscribe to Claude for everybody in our company. So we had Claude for Teams. We also have access to Microsoft Copilot because it's part of the Microsoft 365 bundle. And then we use a bunch of free tools like ChatGPT, Perplexity, and more. The main difference is that the tools that we pay for are the only ones where we ever put client data or data from our consultations and from our work. That is obviously always with permission from the clients and from the participants. So there are some safeguards to place before we do that, but we only do so with the tools that we pay for and where we have a guarantee that the data is not going to be used for training purposes by the model companies. And for the other tools, we do pretty much whatever, really, because we wouldn't put any sensitive information in there. So things like Perplexity or ChatGPT or Gemini, we would use for regular web searches, a bit of background research. We don't want to use Claude for whatever reason. So, for example, I prefer to use Perplexity when I do quick searches because I just find it's much quicker and the quality of what I get is pretty similar. I'm not talking about the deep research reports, just I want a bit of background on topic X. I just ask Perplexity and get the get a summary of what I need to hear. So there's, yeah, lots of uses, but the more professional ones, I would say, are the ones that apply to the consultancy life cycle. So if you think about projects, you need to secure projects, which means you need to understand the client, you need to write up a proposal for the client. And so there are some aspects of that that can be supported by AI. Then as you do projects, AI can help with thematic coding, with analysis, with the development of materials to support, say, interviews or focus groups, workshops, for example, what questions to ask, or give you ideas for exercises. And then AI can also help with the, so when you write, because this is professional use, it's always with a lot of oversight, which is what we'll be talking about later. But it is really lots of different use cases.
Awesome. Awesome. I think that ties into the first topic pretty well in terms of oversight, right? So, in this world, apparently there's Andrea sent me some interesting notes, and I'm completely outside of the professional world of AI use. I use it for my own personal use. I use it for Substack. And I mentioned to you in the preview room that I have used it in very basic level cases for my own business and for my work. We won't get into that too much because there's really no oversight. That's just me. Or for a worst case scenario, I embarrass myself on the internet a little bit, which I'm fine with. So in terms of oversight, we'll get into the first topic here. So there's some gap there within firms. Let's say specifically for in your case in consulting firms, right, between policy and practice, right. So I kind of want to get into how wide that gap really is, and also in terms of oversight, you have certain documents involving governance, and I want to know the difference between that and actual personal accountability. If we can get into that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, in my experience, the gap between having a policy and doing AI right is pretty wide, and I think that extends beyond consultancy. It's about any organization that makes use of AI, and the greatest thing, the greatest consideration here is about the fact that policies are very easy to put together. So any organization could put out a policy saying we do so and so. And because that requires just a bit of clear thinking, potentially informed by AI, by the way, a little bit of drafting, and then sign off by somebody senior who just has a look and think, does it sound sensible? Yes. You sign it off, you finalize it, it goes on the company website or in the policies folder, and that's the end of it. But practice is a lot harder because essentially it has to hold across lots of different contexts within an organization. So it's different people, different projects, different pressures, different organizational functions. And what we're seeing in a lot of organizations is that the governance, in theory, is quite sophisticated, but the people who actually sign off on work, so a senior employee signing off the work of a more junior employee before it goes to a client, those processes are not as developed because people haven't always updated their understanding of what sign off requires. So in the past, you had to check what others had done, but you could trust that they had done the whole thing. Whereas now, you don't know. And this is not to say we should stop trusting our colleagues, but it's to say that if AI, particularly generative AI, has played a role in the mix, it would have brought a bit of randomness that if it's not controlled, it can risk embarrassing you.
Absolutely. I think that gets into transparency, which we'll get into soon. That's a huge topic for me. I just want to say before we continue, thank you everybody for being here. I see there's a lot of chats there, especially from WeFighter. We'll get into all the chats towards the end of the conversation, but I will mention I am drinking a black coffee WeFighter. That is morning time for me. And for Andrea here, it's afternoon. We're in different parts of the world, which is a really cool thing about Substack. The people I've met here from all around the globe with different skills and different ways that they're actually using AI. So this topic is very interesting to me. Oh, sorry there. I got a 2-year-old getting ready to go to preschool, so that's fun. Luckily, my wife is taking care of that. So yeah, not to go off on too much of a tangent. Let's lead into the next topic here, which is accountability. So basically, you mentioned that you use Claude, for example, for the most part, but you also use other tools, and there may be certain tool restrictions, right, depending on what type of firm you're at, what type of business you're running. So I want to get into accountability on that side, and basically, if someone's using AI, obviously they should be transparent. and we'll get more into transparency a little bit later. But if someone's using AI in your firm, for example, who's signing off on it, right? Is really the question that I have for you.
Okay, so there are three layers here. So the first layer is at the organizational level, and that will be our managing director. So there are discussion in the company, but then the managing director would sign off on the tools that are permitted within the company. In the UK, there's also a scheme called Cyber Essentials that regulates what we can or cannot do. So it's a certification. So if you are certified, there are certain things you can or cannot do. So there's a bit of governance in that way. But then each project has different rules in that each project for us is for a different client. And so clients have different levels of tolerance for risk. In some cases, there are clients might share something that is confidential or under NDA that they might not be comfortable putting into AI. So the way that works is that each project typically has a lead, and then the project lead would discuss with the client lead on what we're planning to do, and the client lead would specify, look, this thing we're comfortable with, this other thing we are not comfortable with. So it's always an open conversation. So it's open and transparent conversation, and then essentially the client signs off on the use. Yeah, so that is usually how it works. A good example of this is, for example, Otter. So Otter is a transcription tool that is based in the US. It's based in California, and they do have a lot of language around the general, so the GDPR. So it's the regulation around data protection in Europe. But one of our clients a few years ago just wasn't comfortable with us putting recordings to be transcribed in a tool that is mainly hosted in the US. And so that was a case where the conversation led to a decision to not use Otter for transcription because the client didn't feel it was appropriate. But the only way you can manage the situation is to be transparent upfront, because if this had emerged later on in the project, it could have been pretty tricky to manage from a legal perspective, for example.
Makes sense. So there's kind of a spectrum of clients, right? Clients that will sign off on your use of AI, clients that won't, certain tools here, certain tools there. In a certain way, I'm sure I'm not in the consulting world, but it sounds like at the end of the day, the client is the boss, right?
Uh, yes, I mean, this is the professional services sector. The client is always the boss, and at any given point in time, as a consultant, you have probably four to six bosses plus your internal boss. So it's yeah, you have to be flexible. It requires some mental agility and just to be able to switch context depending on what project are you working on at each given time of the day. So yeah, it can vary quite a lot. But that said, I would say that these days, organizations are starting to consider AI more like Google, as in it's a tool that people are going to use. So you don't have to spend as much time as you did maybe 2 years ago, even talking about AI and explaining what it is, what you're going to do with it. People are getting used to it also on the client side. So the effort needed to bring people on board is a lot less than it used to be.
Understood. Yeah, that makes total sense. So I guess that kind of rolls in nicely to the next topic. And I think this applies to so many use cases for AI. For example, I have a recent article about AI agents and how if we lose the human touch completely from beginning to end, that's going to be a real issue. And that's already happening now. Aside from the safety and security issues and using AI agents, a lot of people are just fully automating these agents to the point where there's no human touch in the decision making process. They're not even confirming a final decision. They're just letting them run and do whatever they want. So I think in many ways, probably in your world as well, AI can be used as a sort of subtle excuse, right? To say, I used AI, I didn't catch this one part or something like that. So basically the there still has to be some professional responsibility that sits with it on the human side as well. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in a recent article, I shared an example that happened maybe a year or so ago where I was sent some social media messages to review, because as part of our projects, we often have to help clients with communication planning as well. And so we were turning our findings into something that the client could then use to communicate with their stakeholders. And the messages, the draft messages for social media, I can't recall if it was X or LinkedIn, but that sort of thing, the messages they just weren't any good. And I was slightly surprised because it wasn't a terribly complex task there. And when I asked what's happened, I gave some feedback and asked what's happened. The answer I was given was that, well, that's what ChatGPT came up with. And I was slightly taken aback there because that wasn't an acceptable response. And what bothers me wasn't that AI had been used, because I was describing it. We are using AI for so many different things professionally, and that's a reality of how people work now. But what bothered me was that the use of the tool had been offered to me as an explanation, almost an excuse why the output wasn't right. So it was almost as if ChatGPT's authorship changed the question of whether the output was any good. And what I could see from my end was that the review of that output had been skipped. And the fact that the ChatGPT was mentioned as a reason made that very visible. So I think the problem there is that the AI tool had become a buffer between a practitioner and their professional judgment, which is exactly the scenario you were describing before, when organizations deploy agents and just let them roam free.
Yeah, it's very dangerous in many ways. No, especially from a security aspect. I tend to mention this guy in almost all my live streams, but I'll mention it again. There's a Substack called Toxec, Toxsec, and he's a very professional guy, cybersecurity guy. And I was just on the edge about to just jump off the cliff to start using these agents in my own workflow. And basically he put me in my place and said, listen, and most of what he said went over my head. Be careful. Maybe get a little more technical with your knowledge of how to use computers and things like that, because these agents are currently not secure. And that's aside from the point of the fact that you're letting it make decisions for you in real time, which can be dangerous in and of itself. So, at the end of the day, we have to take some personal responsibility. Everybody has the capacity to take that responsibility to still preserve the human touch with AI. So I think this rolls into the next topic nicely here in terms of what you were just discussing. So citations are so important. Every article that I put out, I make sure to have proper citations, references section, cite them properly throughout the article, because AI can make mistakes. I'm a big ChatGPT guy. Right at the bottom of ChatGPT, it says, ChatGPT is AI. AI can make mistakes. And so the problem is 90% of the population is not using AI on a very deep level. And they're using it kind of a search engine like Google, which is fine. That's great. But they kind of take whatever comes out of that process and take it as this is now true, which is why citations are so important. You have to go look at sources and double check. So I want to get into AI citations with you on the professional end as well. How essential is a proper citation when you're using it in the field of consulting?
I mean, it is essential across all consulting. It's especially important for what I do because I work in research and higher education. So my audiences are also especially switched on with regard to referencing and citations. So yeah, it is really important. And I think the greatest barrier here is taking what AI says at face value. And there are two potential problems here. One is whether the source is correct. So there's the problem of hallucination. So the AI just giving you something that doesn't exist. But that is fairly easily checked in that if you click the link and the link takes you nowhere or takes you somewhere unexpected, then you can confirm quite quickly that that's the case. But the more sneaky type of problem is when the link is correct. So it gives you a title of an article, the authors, a date, a publication, whether it's a journal or a report. You click through and that's right. But then what the AI is giving you in its response doesn't match what the article actually says. And that is genuinely dangerous because you might end up claiming things cited in an article because the AI said so. But then when you go and examine the article, that is not the case. And so for my workflow, that is really critical because, well, I use that as a starting point. So if Perplexity tells me so and so is correct, here's a source. I click through the source, make sure the source is correct, and then I read through the source to make sure that it's actually making the point that Perplexity is making. So it's these two layers. One is very easy to check. The other one is a bit. The reason why the aspect is a bit sneakier is partly that AI tends to simplify responses for readers so that they are more understandable. And especially when you're working with academic literature, you would expect the language to be a bit more technical, specialist, lots of acronyms. And sometimes AI simplifies that so that the average reader, whatever that might mean, but a lay person would understand. And sometimes it just makes a wrong assumption or interpretation of the original text. And yeah, that can range from slightly embarrassing to actually dangerous. So if you look at medical applications, for example.
Right. So basically, what you're saying is, if you don't understand something, it's pretty hard to verify it. Correct. So, and before we keep rolling on with these topics, I just want to say, not to break off too many times. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Really appreciate it. Continue engaging in the live chat, and we'll get into as many questions and comments as possible towards the end. So again, really appreciate it. And again, an extra special thank you to Andrea here for joining me in this live stream. This is a really interesting topic to me, and it's not something I've really covered before. So this is awesome. It's fun. So basically, in terms of like verification, right? So for example, lately my newsletter has been more and more AI focused. I do have a background in physics that I haven't touched in a long time, which is not riding a bicycle. If you don't do it, but luckily I still do have some background. So if I have some type of physics or science integration into one of my articles in relation to AI, I'm able to understand for the most part, unless it gets super deep. Quantum mechanics wasn't my forte, for example. So basically, we have a topic here. It's called skill erosion, right? So and it ties into exactly what you were just talking about, from AI citations down to, if you don't have a deep understanding of something, it's hard to verify, right? So basically, so what does that look like in your world? If you've used AI for one of your clients, they've signed off on it, and then, for example, something came up, that example you mentioned recently, where someone said, "Well, this was ChatGPT," right? So they're kind of taking the responsibility off their own shoulders, right? So if they can't understand it and they can't verify it, that responsibility should fall on their shoulders, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a tricky one in that I think a client is entitled to expecting correct findings. If they can't verify them, it's one of those cases where, imagine you going you take your car to the mechanic and they tell you it's got this problem, that problem, you've got to fix them. It's $500. You have to trust the professional expertise of the mechanic, or unless you know about cars. It's the exact same here. So a client should expect my professional expertise to, well, yeah, to deliver a report that makes sense, that is correct, it doesn't have any substantial errors. And if they can't spot it, they might pay for something that is wrong. Just some people might end up paying the mechanic those $500 when nothing was actually broken. But that's all about professional ethics and honesty. If it's I think if there are errors, there are two scenarios. One is, if errors were just errors, errors happen, and clients do tend to understand that. And if you're willing to fix them at no additional cost to them, usually things are fine. People tend to be reasonable. But when errors are completely avoidable and it emerges that it was because of a lack of accountability and responsibility or governance, that's when it becomes more problematic. And in an article I wrote recently on my Substack publication, there was an example of a big consultancy that had to return a hefty sum to their client because essentially they hadn't done their job properly. So the quality assurance function had failed, and some pretty significant errors had been made that could and should have been avoided. So it's that, yeah, it's a pretty tricky balance.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that ties into our last topic pretty good here, which is transparency. So before we dive into it on your end, I will say on my end, for a long time there, I've always been a very private person. And even my profile picture on Substack is an AI generated image. So until I started doing these live streams, I didn't put my face out there, which I'm happy I did. I think at the end of the day, you have to do uncomfortable things to move forward in life. And if you just stay comfortable, nothing's going to happen. So basically, people thought I was just a robot because I post daily because I use AI heavily to help me write my Substack. And I'm very transparent about that fact. In addition to that, I use AI image generation in all of my articles. Also very transparent about that. So basically, in the professional world, right, is there some type of legal framework to say if you're using AI in consulting, do you have to say that you're using it? How do you have to phrase that? Do you have to basically say not just that you used AI, but where you used it and how you used it?
Right. So it's not a legal framework per se. So there are legal frameworks for the use of AI in specific sectors. So when, for example, sensitive data is involved, medical data, personal data. So there are some cases where this is mandated. There's regulation at the EU level, in the US, and in many other parts of the world. In consultancy, that doesn't really apply. So obviously, we are touched by regulation on how we manage personal data, but that is more about making sure that the tools and platforms that we use manage data responsibly, store it in the right place with the right type of protection. And there isn't much about AI there. So disclosing the use of AI is more a matter of good practice, a good professional practice, and ethics. And you can really tell the difference between organizations that say we may use AI tools to support our work, as in that is a disclaimer. It says some of this is will be AI generated, and that's it. And you can't really tell what exactly, how was AI used, what for. In other cases, as you were saying earlier, actually, I use AI to do my writing. I use AI to create my images. You can start becoming a bit more explicit about what uses your use cases AI is satisfying for you. And in consultancy, what I do, you can have statements that are a bit clearer and a bit more detailed. So you can say, AI has informed the process of thematic coding under the close supervision of human analysts who have validated and improved results iterated after whatever number of steps. You can say AI has been used in the report writing process for the purposes of ensuring narrative flow and spell checking and grammar. So it just explaining exactly what AI is being used for, as opposed to saying AI might have been used here. It's a difference between a signal that AI exists, which is the disclaimer approach, and a signal that clearly explains what happened, who checked the AI work, how data was handled. So this second approach is a matter of, I think, good professional practice and good ethics in consultancy work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you think that there should be a legal framework? Should people legally be required to disclose that they're using AI instead of just saying that we may be using it?
I don't think so personally. I mean, this is just my personal opinion, but AI has been developing as a tool, lots of tools that we use it. And if you think about all the big transitions that we had technologically, it's almost saying, I mean, AI has an element of judgment, so it's different, but Google as well. So do you need to say that you use Google? Not really. I use Google in all of my consultancy projects. And Google actually has a lot of judgment embedded in its algorithm, and it's as obscure and opaque as generative AI. Granted, it's less random. So generative AI has an element of randomness in it that basically mess up what you write in that it can make it incorrect. The Google algorithm, the Google data is simply less transparent. But I think these are tools that we have at our disposal. And I think most organizations that I've seen in my sector are voluntarily aligning in this way. It seems this is the right thing to do. And so they are doing it. And quite honestly, if I received a report written by I could tell. Anybody who knows a subject could spot a report written by AI on that subject quite easily. Not in terms of each word, which of these words has been written by AI, but overall, you can tell that it's not proper work. And because consultancy is entirely based on trust and reputation, you essentially can't afford to behave in a way that is not proper and ethical. So, yeah, essentially what I'm saying is that we probably don't need a legal framework because if we don't behave properly, then we'll just lose clients.
Right, right. It's funny actually. I'm not really pushing back on what you're saying. I actually agree with you. I think that it should be a personal responsibility issue rather than necessarily a legal framework. It should be. I think that it should be disclosed, and you should be transparent about it, and that should be a personal responsibility. But funny enough, I actually believe that even though AI can be used as a tool, I don't consider AI a tool. And I won't go too deeply into it. I've written an article about it, but the idea behind that is a tool doesn't get to know you in the same way that AI gets to know you, especially if you allow it to. For example, most of the population uses AI, Google, kind of like we just mentioned, and they don't even know that there's an actual button in the settings to turn on memory. And when you turn on memory and you use it frequently, it really gets to know you in a way that a tool just doesn't. It doesn't mean that it can't be used as a tool. It definitely can. But in the background, I believe that there's a lot more going on, especially behind closed curtains. But that's a whole different topic.
Yeah, I
So,
think it's
yeah,
very interesting because I use AI in my writing as a consultant, and one of the things I've been reflecting on is the fact that memory. So my Claude account has got different. I find that my Claude account is making better judgments than a colleague's Claude account because I am more experienced than that colleague. And so the conversation that I have with Claude of a different professional quality, if you see what I mean. So I push back on more strategic things, for example, and so my cloud is recognizing things, my cloud, whatever that means, but my cloud is recognizing things that the a colleague's account isn't based just on that aspect of memory. So I completely agree. It's a very important feature.
yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, before we wrap up here, there was something that caught my attention in one of your recent articles. It was actually a collaborative article. If you want to mention the other creator, I just don't have her name pulled up in front of me. Well, I'm sorry, what was her name, Andrea?
Is it Cecile?
Cecile, yes.
Yeah.
So basically, there was a really cool image there of these four principles of responsible AI use in the professional world. And I think this can go outside of the professional world as well in general. And the four principles, there was a really cool picture. It was four pillars. So you have responsibility, accountability, auditability, and transparency. So basically, if you can give us a quick background around that, I'd love to hear it.
Of course, yeah. So, I mean, in a way, that is a summary of our conversation so far. So, responsibility is about who owns an output and ensures high quality. So, in that example about the social media message, is the person writing the output should have taken responsibility for that social media message. Accountability is more about governance. So it's about who is named and answerable within an organization, it's to clients. So as I was saying before, there's that element of having managing director or senior representative in the organization ultimately responsible for things, and then project leads being responsible in the case of client interactions. Then auditability is about whether you can reconstruct the reasoning behind a piece of work. That is especially difficult because AI is quite opaque. And so, because it operates a black box, it's very hard to tell exactly what it's done. And in one of my upcoming pieces, I will share a code implementation of thematic coding. That's this auditability principle, but it's generally really hard and actually costs a lot of tokens in the generation to keep a strong track record that is fully explainable. And finally, transparency is all about how openly AI's role is communicated. to internal teams or colleagues as well as to clients. So yeah, I think it summarizes quite well the conversations we've had so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, yeah, before we get into the chats here and we wrap up, and again, thank you everybody for being here, all 151 of you. Really appreciate it. It's really cool. Yeah, I'm going to get into the chats. We'll try and answer as many questions as well. Obviously, we're in different time zones, so I'm going to be heading off to work soon. Yeah, we'll take it from there. So basically, sort of a few closing questions to wrap up the conversation itself. And I think this applies to everybody here as well. Everybody watching now, everybody that will be watching later. In terms of your AI, your personal AI use, whether you're using it in the professional world for personal uses, for Substack, whatever it might be. And I haven't gone off and just read off the bullet points, but for these I will, because I think that the questions themselves are pretty important. So, are you truly reviewing your outputs? Has AI lowered your standards? And where has convenience become dependence? So I will say for me personally, and then you can go into it as well, Andrea. Are you truly reviewing your outputs? Yes, as much as I can. Obviously, I'm balancing a lot of different things in life now. There's work, there's business, there's family. Well, probably I should put family first. Let me change that up. Family, work, business, personal life. Try and get out on the golf course sometimes when there's not a blizzard in New York. But basically, as much as I can, I am. And in terms of AI lowering my standards, I actually think that AI has increased my standards in every way possible. And in terms of convenience becoming dependence, I've definitely become dependent on AI. And again, this actually relates to one of my recent articles. It's called The New Normal. And every time a new technology comes out, we just get so used to it so quickly that we forget to just take a step back, look from the outside in, and realize what's happening. A lot of us, a lot of these AI creators that I work with, we may kind of be in a bubble in the sense that the way that we use AI is a little bit deeper than most people. And basically, if someone were to turn off the switch on AI right now, I don't really see how the world can continue moving forward. It's become so integrated in our lives, in business, in general infrastructure, that dependence is actually just it's a fact of life at this point for so many people. So, what do you have on these last few closing questions, Andrea?
Right. So, do I review my outputs? 100% yes, especially professionally. If I didn't, it would be a disaster. And actually, social media example happened in lots of other cases as well, where I've seen things that they didn't quite seem to stack up. And when I started poking, I realized, oh, that is AI generated. That is wrong. So yeah, in consultancies, specifically, not reviewing your outputs is a big no. You absolutely have to. And sorry, what were the other questions? One is about dependency. I think dependency is a big yes. Cleo was saying it's part of what we do. So there was a big argument that AI should reduce our workload. AI hasn't reduced anybody's workload. We're just cramming more things in the same time. And in today's economic circumstances, there's a lot of pressure on finances. Clients have less and less money, and so you need to deliver more for the same amount of money, and AI is helping us make that happen. So it's yeah, there are big dependencies, and I don't think it would be possible at the moment to go completely off AI personally.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. I mean, if you just look back a few years ago to where we are now, I'll just give a quick quote. I mentioned this in another live stream, but I think it matches here as well. It's actually a quote from Sam Altman, not exact, but basically that AI has gone from being okay at high school math to new discoveries and theory. If you look back at 2022, 2023, that's the difference is incredible. So we can only imagine what's going to happen in the next few years coming up here.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, thank you everyone for being here. I'm going to go through the chats now and we'll try to answer as many as possible. I really appreciate you guys engaging here. So let's see. We'll start off with, I think I pronounced his name wrong because he said Y Fighter. So let's see. He's got a lot of chats here. I'm going to scroll down. Let's see here. He says, practice is always harder, but you have to train the way you fight because you fight the way you train. It's well said. That's poetry in motion right there. Let's see. Let's keep scrolling down here. Martin White says, how could you separate clients' preference of AI use in a multi-client business in the daily workflows?
Well, Usually you have to remember, basically, the client A is happy with use of AI and client B isn't. In some cases, you can physically, or I should say digitally, split out some project data from the rest of your project to keep it fully isolated from any risk of being touched by AI. But in the sector where I work, it's not usually that problematic. It's more of a matter of remembering, okay, in this project we can't use AI in this way or that way because the client isn't happy. Now, if you have a huge project portfolio, then it becomes genuinely problematic. But at any given point in time, I'm probably involved in 5+ projects, which is many, but not so many you can't remember.
Right. Right. So yeah, definitely sounds you got a lot going on there. Every client is their own individual, and
Yeah.
yeah, keep track of that.
But as I was
Um,
saying as well, people are getting used to it more and more. So what a few years ago would have looked, oh, I've got to remember that this client wants this and that client wants that. I think the requirements are a bit more harmonized. There are general things that everybody's happy with and general things that more people are less happy with.
right. Yeah, it makes total sense. Let's see. Will Ty here says, have either of you read the book If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies, co-authored by Nate Soares? It's a wake-up call about the dangers of AI that few companies are addressing. Someone actually recently recommended this book to me, and I have to check it out. I haven't been doing enough reading lately, but it sounds very interesting. Have you heard about this book, Andre?
No, I haven't. Very interesting. So I'll definitely take a look.
Yeah, if anyone builds it, everyone dies. Interesting. I'll have to check that out. Y Fighter says this is solid guidance. Really glad I tuned in. I'm really glad you tuned in as well. So thank you for being here. Hopefully I'm pronouncing her name correctly. She is engaged recently as well. Aina Alive says, for the citations, I found perplexity is best. With GPT, I use prompt search. Do not generate an answer if you couldn't find a direct quote. In this case, GPT says this is the meaning I could find, but you can't quote it. Even when AI provided me with a quote or citation, I Google it. 1 out of 5 of the times I can find it or find it in different words. Yeah, I think that's super interesting. I think also you don't necessarily have to hop over to Google. You can ask ChatGPT for sources when it's making certain claims, and then just click on that link and go to the source from there. So you don't necessarily have to hop out of the chat necessarily. You have anything on that, Andrea?
Yeah, no, I would agree that Perplexity, I also find Perplexity the best for that sort of use case. Quite often so if I read a statement that sounds a bit fishy, I'll put it in Perplexity and say, validate, colon, and then I paste the statement. And Perplexity very easily tells me that's correct or that's incorrect and gives me the evidence as to why. So I find that works really well. And the casual searches on ChatGPT or Claude that use web search, I don't find them to be as good. But if you use the deep research features, then those are pretty good.
Awesome. Des Kennedy says, Andrea, do you have a written policy for AI use in your work that outlines your approach with clients, or is it a case of talking it through with each client? It's a good question.
It's both. So Des, I'll send you a link in the Substack DMs with that. It is a public policy. Actually, if anybody is interested, my company's website is research-consulting.com. If you scroll down to the bottom of the page, there's an AI policy. So you can see our public position on AI, and this is what we refer clients to in the first place, and that's what we link in our proposals. Then we have an internally facing version of the guidance that is a bit more operational. So what does that all actually mean in our day-to-day workflows? And then on top of that, we talk clients through things as part of project kickoff meetings. So we would discuss exactly what do things look, and clients often have questions. So we would explain in more detail. So there's a few layers, but there's definitely a written and public policy for how we use AI.
Awesome. Yeah, feel free if you to as well, Andrea. You can link your website in the chat there as well for people to find.
I was
Um,
trying, but the chat is not working, just making a funny sound and it's not letting me type in. I did
that's odd.
try, not quite sure why.
I can type it in for you if you want to. Let me know what the URL is, and I'll type it in for you.
So it's researchconsulting.com.
Research-consulting.com.
And then you just need to scroll down to the page footer and you'll find the link to the AI policy.
Got it. Okay. Research-consulting.com. So I'm going to actually plug a few things in here. One, I'm going to plug in the YouTube channel for everybody that's interested. I started a YouTube channel a few weeks ago where I post these live streams as well as clips. So I'd really appreciate if you hop over there and subscribe on YouTube as well. I just plug that into the chat. And here is Andrea's company, research-consulting.com. And yeah, we'll continue with a few more chats before we wrap up here. Dr. Court says, wow, that's a super interesting point. A tool doesn't get to know you. I'll have to think about that one. I appreciate it. I think it's most people use AI as a tool, use AI as Google on steroids. But when you actually use it on a deeper level, no matter what type of use case you're actually using it for, I think that's the main point that stands out to me. A tool, there's so many different types of tools, right? There's a hammer and nail. The hammer doesn't care who's using it, right? It serves the same purpose. And even all the way forward to the internet already crosses over into that boundary where the internet does get to know you in some ways, and your data is being taken and sold in a huge data broker economy. And then AI just takes it to the next level, where Andrea said here, his Claude is different than his colleague's Claude, right? And even in the way that Andrea said that, it says my Claude, right? So it's very personal. It's a personal thing. So we'll keep going here. Aina Live says GPT also memorizes more than it shows in the memory section. Memory is used if I ask it to memorize. However, it also memorizes a summary of a window or a day. I'm not sure exactly. So even if you can clean up the memory, it will still remember a lot about you. It's one of the special things about it. Some people can be more private and don't want AI to know them as much. For me personally, I want it to know me better than I know myself, because I feel that's the best way for me to use it, especially in the way that I use it. Let's see. Wi-Fighter says my chat knows me for sure. Definitely. It says AI has made everything easier and better. In some ways, I think it's made it easier and better. And in some ways, Andrea mentioned earlier, actually, we're packing in even more work now because we have this. Again, you can call it a tool. I'll call it a tool for this purpose. Because you can use it as a tool, we're able to do so much more, which also I think speaks into another topic, which is the current job loss that we're seeing now versus what people aren't speaking about for the most part, which is the job creation on the other side of this. We're able to do so much more. That comes with every new form of technology. Let's see here. Dr. Court says, this may not be your scope, but what are your thoughts on people developing parasocial relationships with AI? Your statement about it not being a tool, but something more has me wondering. Yeah, I'll touch on that briefly, Dr. Court. I appreciate it. So actually, I've written about this. There's an idea that I had, which is the main use cases for AI, which is there's three. One is what I mentioned earlier, the 90% population uses it, Google on steroids. Two, I call them the specialists. Specialists are basically people that integrate it, kind of Andre here, into your business, into your professional life. You can be coding with it, building with it, apps, websites, Substack, whatever, anything like that. And three is I call them the explorers, hence my newsletter, Exploring ChatGPT, which is exploring AI in a deeper level, maybe ethically, morally, guardrails, safety protocols, all that fun stuff. And then, so those are the main three. But then the four for this comment is actually a smaller group of people, which is growing, which are basically people that are forming relationships with AI. Now, I won't go too deeply into it, but it's definitely a growing population and could be problematic in the future. But Andrea, if you have anything to add to this at any point, feel free. But I am kind of coming up on my time limit here before I have to head off to
Yeah.
work.
No, I think my only comment on that is that it is problematic, and it is genuinely very hard to build AI with suitable guardrails to enable that sort of use for relationships and human support. And I don't know if anybody has tried it, but the Headspace app, which is a meditation app, has got a very good AI assistant that seems to have very strong guardrails. I mean, I tried it. The implementation of generative AI as a support companion is very strong there, and the memory function as well is used brilliantly. But I have seen more generative AI tools that do this badly than tools that do it properly.
Absolutely. Okay, a few more comments here. Rosa Romero says AI gets away with wrong citations because it sounds authoritative by design. Social media misinformation was bad, but at least you could trace it. Most people don't have the time or motivation to fact check AI, and it's built to make them feel they don't need to. So it was responsible for catching it. I think we're still responsible, especially on a professional level, Andrea here. If you're doing what I'm doing, it's a completely different thing. But if you're using it in the business world, yeah, there's no excuse for not taking the time to fact check it. That's just part of it, should be part of the job. Otherwise, you probably risk the job itself. So, yeah, anything on that, Andrea?
No, I think that's exactly it. I mean, the companies, AI companies, try to get away with having that little disclaimer at the bottom of the page saying so and so is an AI tool; it can make mistakes. I don't think there's a better solution in that they couldn't say ChatGPT couldn't hedge every response with that. Here's some knowledge and references. By the way, I'm not sure it's correct. You should check it. That couldn't be the form of the interaction that we have. So I think we have to, yeah, stay vigilant. That's the only way.
Absolutely. And yeah, again, a big thanks to everybody here and for engaging in the live chat. It's been really fun. I will mention again, my name is Lior. I run a newsletter called Exploring ChatGPT here on Substack. I'm going to link the YouTube one more time there if you guys don't mind subscribing. It is free, unlike most things nowadays. So, and this live stream will be over on YouTube as well as some short clips. I really want to thank everyone for being here. I want to especially thank Andrea for joining me here. It's actually our first live stream together. Hopefully we'll do some more in the future. And this topic specifically is something that I haven't really dove into. Usually it's more on the technical side, certain tools, cybersecurity, education, all of these great things as well. But it's really cool to actually get a perspective for someone in the business world and how you're using AI. So, Andrea, anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, I just want to say thanks for having me here. It's been a great conversation. Thanks everybody for joining. And I do look forward to some more of these in the future.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, thanks again, guys, wherever you are in the world. I hope you have a great morning, afternoon, evening. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you again, Andrea. Bye now.
Bye.